Hello everyone, this is Joan Perez Lozano, and in this opportunity, we will be having an overview of a very important activity that takes place during the software engineering process. This activity is code reviews. Let's get us started with the definition of a code review. A code review is an activity or mechanism that is integrated in the software engineering process as an umbrella activity. As many of you software engineers know, umbrella activities are activities that happen throughout the whole software development process. According to Pressman, a code review is the most effective filter from a quality control standpoint. This is very true because it will allow the team to ensure quality of the software product in the most cost-effective manner, as it drives towards ensuring that there are no bugs. Also, developers do this activity for the sake of having a checkpoint where they could find improvements on the design, making code more maintainable, and yes, refactoring plays a key role here. Code reviews present several advantages, and here I list some of them. Code reviews ensure consistency in design and implementation. It is natural that every developer has a unique style of coding. Hence, we can expect developers building components in ways that could stop the development process. Code reviews enforce developers to follow certain coding practices that will help meet the right standards, making software maintainable and readable for current and future contributors of the source code. Share knowledge while finding bugs. This is one of the most important reasons of doing code reviews. As we know, a team is composed of developers of different levels. So when we have junior or entry level developers, it is very likely that they are unaware of specific code techniques that can help them write clean code. Code reviews will help them gain the right feedback from the senior developers and therefore help them improve their technical skills. Code reviews also ensure that code is effective. It lets us make sure that the code written is doing what it is supposed to do. Yes, test cases might be covering 100% of the source code, but with human intervention, we can make sure that this piece of code is following the requirements established by our stakeholder or client, for example. Now, let's put on our reviewer hat and analyze what will be the things that we have to consider when reviewing our colleagues' work. Reviewers most of the time follow a certain set of judgments. Consider that the author will not be part of the group of reviewers. It is important to know that the judgment of the author's work will really depend on every company software development team. There are situations where reviewers will analyze code by looking at things like formatting, style of the code, naming of variables, and test coverage of the test cases. However, these aspects can easily be handled by a program. They all can be automated. For instance, certain existing tools can be used for these things. A feature from an IDE like IntelliJ IDEA, for example, that provides the ability of running code inspections from the command line, where we can check for things like possible bugs, bad coding style, syntax errors, and more. If we want to look at the industry side, Palantir Technologies has developed a tool for their internal use called Baseline, and it consists of a set of Gradle plugins that help writing Java projects, following their defined style. For example, they included checks that adhere to the well-known Google's Java style guide. So, what should we look for in a code review if these parts already are covered by software tools? Take 10 seconds to think and imagine which will be the variables that a reviewer should consider when doing a code review. So hopefully you could come up with some great ideas. There are surprisingly many things that software tools can miss out that humans will not. Here, I will list some relevant aspects to look at. Think about how will you have solved the problem? If your solution is different, why will that be? Is it because your code handles more edge cases? Or perhaps your solution is shorter, cleaner, safer, yet functionally equivalent? Maybe you want to make sure there is an underlying pattern you spotted that is not captured in the current code. Think about libraries or existing product code. There are cases when someone reinvents the wheel. Many times, this is because the author did not know there is already a library that solves the problem. But sometimes, also, this re implementation is done in purpose. So, in these cases, it is important that we make use of comments that clarify if the duplication was done in purpose. It is very important to leave feedback. We have great tools for providing feedback, and we should make use of them. We can use code level documentation, commit messages, and so forth. We can also think of security aspects. For example, we can verify that API endpoints do the right authorization and authentication checks, or we can check if there is a weak configuration, if we are missing log events, etc. As you could see, none of these things will be perceptive by an automated process, so human reviews are crucial. Let's take a look at what some successful colleagues say regarding code reviews. Clement Mihailescu, an ex Google and ex Facebook software engineer, helps us with a good tip for code reviews. He tells us not to submit thousands of lines of code for review. It is very difficult for reviewers to receive a pull request that has thousands of lines of code, as it is much harder to find bugs in it, and this in fact hinders the whole intention of the review activity. The best thing to do is to limit ourselves, and for that, Clement says we should aim for submitting a range of 10 to 100 lines of code for review. Trisha G suggests to give the code review task to junior developers. She supports the idea that if a senior developer wrote a code that a junior developer can understand when code reviewing it, then it's a way for the author of the code to know that they have written understandable code. Of course, the junior developer is not the one that will sign off the code. That last part will be responsibility of somebody else that is more experienced. I want to include a third tip here, and it is related to what Palantir does when it comes to large lines of code that have to be reviewed. Note that this might contrast with what Clement suggests. Palantir says that for complex changes that are too large to fit into the mainline branch as a single unit, it is advisable to consider something they refer to as a stacked code review model. This mainly consists on having a primary branch, for example, feature, and a number of secondary branches, for instance, feature big feature API, and feature big feature testing. Each of these sub-branches encapsulate a subset of the functionality and that are individually code reviewed against the main feature big feature branch. Once all these secondary branches are merged into the feature big feature branch, then we can proceed to create a code review for merging the big feature branch into the mainline branch. I will say we can imagine these techniques sort of like a divide and conquer approach. Carl E. Wiggers tells us that many teams have difficulties to have good code review activities. And in fact, he mentions that the most part is not for technical reasons, but mostly for cultural reasons. This means that there are still companies that do not perform this very beneficial practice. And it is, of course, a huge disadvantage, not only for the development teams, but also for the whole company where this might be happening. It is important to break this reluctancy. Finally, here we can see some case studies of companies that use code reviews and how effectively this activity helped them throughout their software development process. Notice how both code review tools and code reviews performed with human intervention helped enhance the quality of building software by reducing a lot of negative impact in terms of time and cost for these very big and well known companies. This was Joan Perez, and thank you for your attention.